Hi chickens. I've been on YouTube for 1 year today. Well, I've been posting videos for 1 year today, so it's my YouTube birthday today. And I'd like to make a video responding to the very lively debate that's going on since Feather Garden Bell posted her video last night called Eclectic Pagan Frustrations, which I'll link below for you. I'm going to try not to make this too rambly. I've got some notes here to ensure that I don't make it too rambly. The first thing I want to say is thank you to Feather Garden Bell for bringing up such an interesting debate with so many different points of view to it. I watched Kat's video this morning, Cat by Candlelight. I'll also link her video below in case you haven't seen it yet. And I agree with a lot of what Kat said, and I think she put it across very well. I think that what Feather was probably talking about is people who are willfully ignorant, people who are, missing out on the richness and the depth that a good solid grounding of study provides. I think the reason that we talk so much about year-in-a-day studies and the like is because it makes sense that if you have a very solid foundation, then whatever you build on that foundation will be so much more enriching and strong and long-lasting. I mean, that's just common sense. So I think when we talk about needing to have a good grounding in, for example, the history of mythology or sociology, or understanding why different correspondences have come into being over time, all that kind of thing, we're not really talking about sticking stringently to those things. We're just talking about the fact that if we have that knowledge to hand, then all of the intuitive responses that we have to what we're learning will be so much stronger and will be so much more informed. I think that's maybe what Feather was talking about. I don't think she was talking about wanting to abandon the word eclectic for any other reason other than that she feels that some of the videos that she's seen denote eclecticism as being something that kind of throws all book study and all consideration of the past out of the window, and she doesn't want to be kind of clubbed in with that kind of attitude. I think that's what I got from it as well. I'm going to kind of bullet point things. The next thing I want to say is, when I looked at Feather Garden Bell's video, one of the comments below was from Annika, and Annika said that disclaimers are often a very useful and important thing. If there's one thing that I've learned from my 365 days of posting on YouTube, is that disclaimers are very underrated and they're frankly not used enough. When we're talking about our own path and the intricacies of it and the different decisions that we've made with regard to it, disclaimers are useful for a few reasons. I mean, firstly, they're polite. They kind of give across the impression that you are not saying that your path is in any way superior or better. You're just tying it into the many thousands of paths out there as a way to share and exchange information. And also, if you're coming at anything with a very authoritative voice, as Kat said, a disclaimer is important with regard to the people that you're talking to who might potentially be learning from you. I think that any good teacher worth their salt in any kind of setting, be it online, be it informally, be it professionally, be it a university, should always let you know that there are other sources and other ideas and other opinions out there and give you that springboard from which to jump. So I think if that's not being said and people are coming across very full on about their ideas without any kind of disclaimer, and I have noticed that happening sometimes, I think that that can be a cause for concern for a lot of people as well, and can make people want to back off from others. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the danger of teaching anything with an authoritative voice, or talking about anything from the standpoint of it being gospel, when it's metaphysical, and by metaphysical I mean abstract or theoretical. For example, with crystals, which was Feather Garden Bell's example, with crystals I think it's difficult because there are so many people that have such a lot of information on crystals and really take it from a metaphysical point of view, but from a very informed metaphysical point of view. I think it's important even for them to stress that their beliefs are their own and that there are other ideas out there. For example, a crystal teacher told me quite a few months ago now, when I posted a photo of my latest amethyst cluster, that the amethyst cluster, she could see from the photograph that it was very low on energy and that it was not going to be useful to work with unless it was buried in the earth for a few days first. And I responded and said, that I'm not going to be doing that. I mean, thanks for the advice, but it's not really what I think is necessary. I think it's a very powerful stone, and to be frank, you are looking at a photograph of it, so you might be sort of looking at the light washing it out or whatever. and she was saying, no, I can clearly see that it needs to be buried. I've studied crystals for 10 years. I studied the metaphysical properties from my grandmother, and I'm telling you that I know what I'm talking about. And this kind of thing becomes old very fast, because of course when we're talking about metaphysical constructs and concepts, you can't really talk about what's gospel and what's not. Frankly, we can get an overwhelming consensus, like most people have the overwhelming consensus that rose quartz is for love and healing and things like that, and I do get that particular vibration from it. I do. That is what I use it for, and that's what I feel when I hold it. So, from my perspective, that's what's going on for me, but I don't think we can ever talk about things being gospel, so I think the disclaimer is important. There is a responsibility that comes with teaching anything, or that comes from having a voice in the pagan community on YouTube in any sense, but I do feel that serious spiritual seekers will find serious spiritual teachers. We tend to align ourselves with those who foster the kind of attitude and have the kind of information that we want for ourselves and have for ourselves. So I think although there is a worry that people that are new to the path will come along and kind of be bombarded by this misinformation, or by these people that don't take from any particular resources and don't have any grounding in history and anthropology and such, while people worry that there's a danger that people that are new to the path will come along and see all this stuff, I think we need to give spiritual seekers a little more credit when they're at the beginning of their journey for understanding the level of information that they want to have. And there are so many great teachers on YouTube who have a very solid grounding in different pathways and understand different concepts and still have very much gone their own way and formed an eclectic practice, but they'll be able to inform you from a very straightforward point of view, from a pragmatic point of view, without letting things get too flowery with their own definitions and stuff. And that's the kind of teacher that you want. You want a teacher that's going to inspire you to explore your own stuff, but also to give you a solid grounding in what was there before you, so that you have a chance to flavour that into your practice too. So yeah, I do think that in any spirituality, true spiritual seekers will find the people that mesh with them. And that leads me to come on to something that I was talking about in my pantheism, prayer and why labels don't really matter video, which I feel relates somewhat to the debate that's going on now. I do feel that there's a lot of focus on other people's pathways sometimes, and I come to wonder why that is, why that might be, or at least I think that those who are placing overt focus on other people's pathways should wonder why they feel that way. And since making that video and stating, that I feel that when people are overtly looking at other people's paths and talking about where other people are going wrong on their paths, I feel that they ought to look into their heart and ask themselves why that would be. I kind of thought to myself that I think it's fairly obvious that a lot of people who've been on the path for a long time, particularly in the YouTube community, feel that those who are coming along with misinformation, or those that evidently don't have any background in much, or don't really like to crack the books, or don't even really like to communicate with other people who've been on the path for longer than them, because that's a very adequate learning resource too. I think people that are proficient in the path worry that those who are coming along with these videos that have all of this stuff on it that seems to have just been plucked out of the air are damaging to the community as a whole. Maybe they feel that they damage the reputation of the community. I don't know what you think of this if you're watching this, Feather, but I would like to know if that might be the crux of your issue. I mean, does misinformation hurt the community as a whole? Do other people's paths matter in terms of how they reflect upon yours, possibly? I don't feel that somebody else's path personally reflects upon mine. I feel that I'm free to go my way and they're free to go theirs. But I don't place any sense of overt pride in being an eclectic pagan per se. So I suppose if other people are doing things or saying things that I don't quite agree with, I can kind of click off and move on. I don't feel that it hurts the community as a whole, but perhaps you and perhaps others do. Perhaps people feel that it does the name eclectic pagan a huge disservice when people don't present themselves and their information in the right way. And maybe that's something that I've overlooked. Maybe perhaps it does hurt the community and I need to think about that, since I am part of the community. But I've always been one of those people who's just more focused on what I'm doing, and I just feel like if other people have a different path to walk and I don't necessarily feel that they're coming at it from perhaps an intellectual place or an educated place or a place of curiosity, a place of willingness to learn, then perhaps I won't subscribe to them, or perhaps I won't vibe with them, but I don't feel that they're actually personally hurting me by going on that journey. I feel like that's their journey to go on, and I think a lot of stress could be avoided if other people felt the same way perhaps, but I do appreciate there's another point of view, and I would like to hear more from anybody who thinks that certain figures who enter the community with misinformation, or enter the community very much preaching their own designed tradition without kind of focusing or relating it to anything else, I wonder if you do think that they hurt you personally, or that they do hurt the community. Raven Nightsong talked about the importance of allowing spirituality and spiritual thought to evolve in her video response. And I think this is hugely important, and my spirituality, my spiritual pathway is often, as she said, pushing the envelope. I like to be outside of that box. And I think that that is actually the very poignant and relevant other side of this debate. I think that both sides of the debate have their place. I think that Cat and Feather discussing the importance of having a strong grounding and having that foundation mixes perfectly with Raven Nightsong's reminder that spirituality and spiritual pathways have evolved over time. They've evolved, and they've been permitted to do that by human consciousness, by the leaps in human consciousness, by the changes in culture, the changes in language, the losing and gaining of information from thousands of years ago, you know, the myths that we've lost, the stuff we've deconstructed, the things we've dug up. We've learned more, we've shed away less of our social constructs and barriers. And as we do that, spiritual pathways, even the very most stringent and rigid of traditions, will change anyway. They will evolve. And as we evolve, we need to communicate so we can exchange these ideas. And I suppose some people would call it ascend. I don't particularly favour that word, but it's the same kind of thing. We're talking about spiritual evolution and exploring and learning more and feeling more. So I think they both have their place, I really do, because as I said at the beginning of the video, the strong foundation paves the way for the building of evolution to occur in a way that's healthy, in a way that's well-rounded. And I wanted to make an example here of my own authoritative voice on YouTube, I suppose. The only thing that I really talk about with any great degree of authority on YouTube is tarot, because I've been studying it for a long time and I've now started to teach it on YouTube. And one thing that I would say is that I'm very much in between those two camps. For example, there are some people that teach that you do not need to learn the standardised universal definitions for any of the cards. You don't need to learn about the system which integrates the different themes and of life and so on. All you need to do is look at the images and draw from your own intuitive mind. Now, this I think is something that I would not teach, and I've stressed before in my trainee tarot course and in other videos I've done on tarot, that I don't feel that's the way it ought to be done. I think that there is a pool, and the pool is the universal standardised understanding. And when we draw from that pool of universal standardised understanding, we then begin to place upon it our own intuitive insights, and that can go to the moon if that's what you want. But not drawing from the pool means a few things. Firstly, it means that if you don't have any understanding of the standardised universal definitions for tarot cards, you're going to be making up very much your own system. And the problem with that is that the tarot system of definitions is actually perfect. Every single message in every single card has its own meaning for its own thing, and therefore it's a completely holistic tool. It's an overview of the whole of human experience. You can't miss anything out, it's all there. So when you're refusing to use that system in favour of completely using your own intuitive insights, you may not get a system that is as holistic in nature, and therefore the people you're reading for, or if you're reading for yourself, you won't get the amount of nourishment and nurturing that would come if you understood all of the definitions, if you're drinking from that pool, as I call it. The second problem you've got, if you do not have any understanding of the universal accepted definitions, is that you're missing out on the opportunity for true community to really interact with other people who are passionate about the tool. If you go on, for example, the Eclectic Tarot forum and you start talking about your idea of a definition of a card which came purely from your own intuitive mind, and you can't back it up with the universal accepted definition and how yours differs from that and why that is, and you know what the pathway was towards it, you're going to alienate yourself. You're not going to be able to integrate properly with a community that have a very definite grounding in what the basics are and in what the universal definitions are. So that's the two primary reasons why I would say it's very important to have some grounding in book study at least. or video study, however you want to do it. But, you know, you should know what other people know and then find out what you know from within. There's a balance. And without those two things, your study is going to be somehow lacking. It's either going to be too formulaic and too academic and too structured because you've only gone by the book, or it's going to be completely groundless, airy-fairy, very sort of, how can I even put this? It's not solid, it's not got any core, because you're totally going from your own mind and you're not understanding the holistic nature of the tool, which encompasses everything. For example, you might intuitively think that 50 of the tarot cards are about love and romance, which means that your clients are going to get a very one-sided and complicated and inaccurate reading. So it's important to have that book study there first, and I truly believe that. So when I looked at how I tie it in with how I teach tarot, I realised that yes, I definitely agree with both sides of the argument. You need both there without a shadow of a doubt. But, you know, finally I just wanted to say that I think that spiritual freedom is very important. I qualified as a spiritual counsellor earlier this year. And even before I qualified, I was helping people face to face with various different things. I think because they see me as a spiritually centered person, and because I've read tarot for a good 14 years now. But since qualifying and since offering different options on the shop, which are much more in depth, which are to do with what I've learned over time, I've realised that a lot of clients, or quite a few clients that have come to me because they're trying to formulate their own tradition. They're trying to find something in spirituality that works for them, that's relevant to them, that they can feel really connects them with the divine and really connects them with the true sense of who they are. And what they're doing is they're trying to pull themselves out from the umbrella of the tradition that they were raised with. Or they're trying to free themselves from the tradition that they put upon themselves all that time ago, that now no longer feeds them, it doesn't nourish them. So there's a lot of guilt there. Sometimes, particularly when people are coming out from under the Christian umbrella, obviously there's a lot of guilt because of the associations that witchcraft or New Age or any kind of other spiritual pathway which is eclectic, which is a mishmash, there is that guilt associated with it. But there's also this feeling of rigidity, there's this feeling of needing to let go, and there's this feeling that if only they could find something that was right for them, and that didn't feel in some sense fraudulent, or in some sense vapid, or in some sense like it didn't make sense because it's coming from their heart. If they could just let go of that preconceived notion that they need to follow a strict tradition, then they would be happy with their spiritual evolution. So part of my job is to help them find a way to carve out their own path unapologetically and with true passion and true spirit. So I think the word eclectic is very important, and I don't think we should ever think about rejecting it or getting rid of it. I think we should celebrate it for the freedom that it brings to people who really are looking to find something that feeds them and nourishes them. And at the end of the day, that is the most important thing after all, which brings me kind of full circle to that point I made about focusing too much on other people's pathways. As I said, maybe I've missed a trick. Maybe when people come out with misinformation, or when they seem to have some kind of, when they seem to be in some way recalcitrant or stubborn when it comes to actually learning what's deeper, or get more insight into something, perhaps that is harmful for the community as well. I don't know. But I think Kat's point, and I think Feather Garden Bell's point as well, is that it's harmful for the spiritualist doing it. It's harmful for that spiritualist who's not taking of the food of everything that is on offer. For example, for me, I'm reading the Norse myths again at the moment, and I can testify to the fact that it is extremely nourishing, it is extremely nurturing to just get back to the solid foundation of what we know and where it comes from, and why the language is how it is, and why the skaldic poems are how they are, and you know why the Norse people really believed there was 9 worlds. What did that have to do with their culture? What did the different deities have to say about people who were ploughmen, and those who were Vikings, and those who were mothers, etc. This is incredibly enriching. So I don't think that we should get our feathers ruffled about whether or not it looks bad on us that somebody hasn't cracked the books that they could crack. But I think just from a loving and nourishing place, it would be nice to extend a hand to those who perhaps aren't so grounded in book study and aren't so grounded in history, and say, hey, you know, your practice will be all the richer and all the deeper for it. And that's just about all I had to say. Thank you very much for listening, guys. Blessed be, and happy 1 year YouTube birthday to me.